All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, we do my preview and prediction for the 2022 Independence Bowl. Houston and Louisiana-Lafayette, 6.5-point line in favor of the Cougars. 16.5 is the over-under. Friday, December 23rd, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Independence Stadium in Shreveport, Louisiana is the site of this one. Houston leads the series 6-3 with UL last winning in 2006. Looking at the Louisiana-Lafayette offense, this is a unit that's kind of maintaining, 27 points per game, a little under 370 yards per contest. They don't really have much of a passing game, though. Chandler Fields, he certainly had his fair share of struggles. Ben Woolridge, he wasn't exactly great. He had a 15-5 ratio before that, before he got hurt. But this is not a team that has a lot of production through the air by any means. Again, only 136 yards per game for Fields. Best receiver being Michael Jefferson. Far and away leads the team in every category. 51 receptions, 810 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Neil Johnson at tight end right behind him at 277. And then John Stevens, only 11 catches on the year, but for 237 yards. It's just not a team that really airs it out. And they do have a good bit of experience in some production from years past, like Peter LeBlanc at pass catcher. They just don't really air it out that much. Chris Smith, though, he's the lead back. He's one of the lone returning veterans. I expect to have a much better year. 580 yards, 3 touchdowns, 58 yards per game. 5.1 yards per attempt is very respectable, but this is an offense that's certainly not been all that good this year. Billy Napier departs, takes a lot with him, and they've certainly, been reeling because of that. This is an offensive line. Cyrus Torrance departed. A few other guys left as well. They were kind of built in Napier's tenure, around being able to run the football with physicality and having a dominant offensive line. That really hasn't been the case much this year. No one has really stepped up on this unit. Maybe A.J. Gilly at guard, but that's about it. Everyone else kind of average year for this unit. So nothing too spectacular with this offense. I do think Smith and Jefferson are two great individual talents. And again, pass protection's been good, but the offensive line's pretty average. Look at Houston offense that is phenomenal. 37 points per contest, 464 yards per game. Clayton Toombs really carried this year. 4,300 yards, 42 total touchdowns. Does have 10 interceptions, but, he's been around a long time, and he's finally put it together this year. 491 on the ground, 5 scores, completing 67% of his passes, 320 yards per game through the air. He's having a great year. You look what happens. You'll want to see what happens, rather, with Nathan Dell. He's been an elite pass catcher for them. 103 grabs, 1,354 yards, 15 touchdowns for him. Will he declare for the draft? Likely so, but will he play in this game? Remains to be seen. That's a big chunk of production, too, if he's not able to get to go. So that's certainly going to be a big loss. Matthew Golden will be the guy that's going to be looked at to step up, though. 36 grabs, 567 yards, 7 touchdowns for the true freshman. Keyshawn Carter, a veteran, Texas Tech transfer, 35 grabs, 497, and 4 scores of his own. And then Samuel Brown has 41 receptions, 471 yards. So they got guys that will certainly be able to step up. Christian Chahan as well at tight ends. Not been very productive this year, but he's a guy that's plenty capable for this football team if Dell can't get to go. Looking at the backfield, though, Stacy Sneed, 489 yards. Brandon Campbell, 409. They've certainly battled health in this backfield. Toon is the leading rusher, 142 yards per game for this team on about 30 attempts. So 4.7 as a team. That's not really their MOs to run the ball. They do in spurts, but it's mainly to let Toon just sit back and, feel out the defense. The offensive line took in some big strides this year, and Patrick Paul at tackle, he's just been flat out elite for them. A great pass blocker. He's played a lot of snaps this year and been only allowed 1 sack this season, so I've been a big fan of his. Tyler Johnson at guard as well. These two guys probably going to be all conference. They probably were. I haven't seen the list, but 2 guys that were phenomenal for them. This is a good offense. It remains to be seen what happens with Dell, though. Will he opt out or not? Regardless, I still think this offense is going to get theirs. Looking at the Louisiana defense, this is a very good unit. 23 points per game, 361 yards per contest. Defensive lineman Zion Hill-Green. He's been elite on the interior for them. 12.5 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. This is a veteran linebacking core that's right behind him as well. Very productive. Andre Jones, 8.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 for Chris Moncrief, who has 67 tackles. And then, Jordan Quibato, he has, the team high in tackles of 101 of those. He's been around a long time. Braylon Trahan, this is a guy I'm a big fan of at safety. This guy can really get downhill in a hurry. He also has 4 picks, 3 pass breakups. He's been a great coverage asset for Louisiana-Lafayette. That's one thing that was also a staple of Billy Napier's tenure, is just phenomenal defense. Louisiana-Lafayette, they've continued to play great defense despite him departing. They've certainly not been as great against the run as the pass. This is a phenomenal secondary, though. Again, led by Trahan. 15 touchdowns allowed, 15 picks as well. 57% opponent completion rating. This is just a defense that does not give up many big plays through the air. Trey Amos, he's been a ball hawk for them. You also look at Cam Pedoxel at safety. He's also gotten involved a good bit this year, but 11 different guys account for 15 interceptions. That's pretty outstanding. They have a lot of different contributors here for them. But again, the biggest thing for them is going to be penetration. Of course, Hill Green's going to lead the way. Who else will get involved? Will these linebackers provide? Sonny Hazard, an offensive line, he's also been a pass rushing asset. But Hill Green and Andre Jones, they combined for 14.5 of the team's 27 sacks. Those are going to be the guys you're looking at, and that's who Houston's going to look to neutralize. And it's going to be a great matchup. The secondary against this passing attack should be interesting to see. Looking at the Houston defense, a unit that, it's not good. Early on in the year, I thought it was the worst defense I've ever seen. They were just getting absolutely blasted by everybody. And then you probably even seen it a few weeks ago against SMU where they allowed 10 passing touchdowns, allowed 642 yards in that game. They allow about 6 yards per play on average. They somehow bounced back against East Carolina, 3 points allowed, 315 yards, probably the best performance of the year. Just early on in the year, this was just a terrible unit. Not so much on the stat sheet, just the way they played, just fundamentally was not sound one bit. Kansas tore them up. They lost to Texas Tech. They outlasted UTSA, but the defense was not all that good in that game. Just sloppy effort, and they did lose the Tulane by 3 and held them to under 300 yards. So they've certainly had their moments of success. It's just not a very good unit, though. 33.5 points per game allowed, 430 yards per game, 285 through the air. That's one of the nation's worst pass defenses, and of course, I don't think that's really going to be exposed here. They rank 126th in college football in pass defense, only 7 interceptions compared to the 31 touchdowns they've allowed. And you knew the secondary was going to take a big step back this year. Marcus Jones departed along with a numerous amount of other starters as well. But they've just been very poor. Alex Hogan was off to a phenomenal year in the back end. Then he got hurt. It's just a unit that kind of lacks playmaking. Donovan Mutin at linebacker, 79 tackles. I'm a big fan of his. DeAnthony Jones, 12.5 TFL. Nelson Cesar stepping up with 10 tackles for a loss of his own. This is a defensive line that is phenomenal, though. Atlas Bell, another guy, is going to get involved and be productive. Derek Parrish was injured in the 4th game of the year. He had 8.5 tackles for loss in 4 games. This is a highly graded defensive line with Cheryl Blankenson as well. They are deep. They have a great rotation here, and that's going to be the matchup. The running game of ULL against this Houston defensive front. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in this game. I certainly think that matchup favors Houston, even though this defense collectively is a pretty bad unit. I think this game really favors into their hands. It's going to lead us to the final thoughts on the prediction on this one. I think for ULL, the biggest key is to attack multiple times. The pass rush has got to be consistent, of course, but just on offense, just take your shots. You're playing a bad secondary. Michael Jefferson's good. You got a pretty solid group of pass catchers. Just Fields, let it rock. Last game of the year, and you try to get Chris Smith in space as well. The Houston defensive line, you got to let them cook. And of course, like I said, don't get torched in the secondary. Houston 34-29 is a prediction. I certainly could see Houston winning by a lot more, but I just think that ULL, they're not that bad on offense, even though the numbers would suggest in the production would say otherwise. I think this is a solid matchup for them. Again, I was just talking about how the Houston defensive line against this running game is probably going to do pretty well. I think they will, but I think they're starting to have their big plays as well. I think they might force a turnover or two to keep this one a lot closer. I don't see the Ragin Cajuns getting blown out in this one. It's hard to envision that. Houston 34-29, maybe by a couple more points than that. But I think the line, 6.5, is pretty spot on. And I have Houston winning this game. Should be a fun one, though. ULL, I'd say, a good bit of confidence points on Houston here, but we'll have to monitor what happens with Tank Dell. It's going to be something to watch. And then just how will this defense play? It's hard to put all your eggs into one basket when it comes to a defense like this. But I do think the matchup favors them pretty well in the trenches. So that's me for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.